Good morning, Joyce.
And how are you?
I'm good.
Happy spring.
Happy spring. Someday I'll take off this jacket, but not yet.
Me too. It's a little cold,
It's a little cold.
but the heat's not on.
The other day in one of my groups, I had people write in the chat words they felt to describe the other people in the group. And one person wrote family. And it made me think about belonging, the sense of belonging. And do you want to talk about belonging?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great subject.
What comes to mind for you when you think about adoptees and belonging?
A few things. One, the word belonging. Longing is, really wanting something, really, I can't think of any words that truly describe it, but longing has depth to it and it's missing something and it's about something that isn't available that you long for, that you want for. And I think that's a great description of what goes on for adoptees, that there's a longing for connection. There's a longing to belong, to belong, to be part of the family, as you use that word. And I think that in adoption, one of the very hard things that we all have to come to grips with is that we belong in both families and we belong in neither. There's a way that you, at birth or at age 7 or at age 14, you're adopted and you become part of a family. And in the best of all possible worlds, it's a good experience. You're cared for and nourished, and you live a life that makes sense. And you belong. You have a place at the table. You have photographs of you at different ages with your family on vacation or at a holiday. And you belong, but there's a part of you that doesn't. And whether you know you were adopted or not, there's a feeling that most adoptees that didn't know they were adopted, that were late discovery or whatever, always had this feeling that something was missing and that there was this loss. And it really it impacted their sense of belonging in their adoptive family. And then you have people who either have an open adoption or open their closed adoption by searching as a young adult or an adult. And they describe their experience with their birth family as, a relief to find people who you look like. It's sort of fun to look at photographs and see that there's a great aunt that you really resemble, or that, the people are like you. They enjoyed the same things. They were artistic or athletic or whatever. So there's a belonging there that you didn't have. It confirms for you that genetically you really do have these traits. That everyone always told you you were great at sports, but you didn't believe them. And now you find out you're part of a very sports-oriented family genetically. So you accept yourself in a different way and you belong. But you don't belong in that family. You didn't grow up in that family. There's not a place for you at the table. You're not in any of the photographs. So it's a balance of figuring out how to put your life together and how to belong when you never had the experience of fully belonging in either place.
The other day, it occurred to me that that at one point I was a little kid and my parents sat me down or did something and told me I was adopted, and I don't remember, and I don't think about that moment because I don't remember it, but it hit me like what it might have been like for my brain in that moment, because the whole world as I knew it became something else. And I think it's so easy to kind of iron over that conversation. Like my parents told me I was adopted, but I was fine. They love me. But to really, that meant that when I walked to the playground, I was thinking, I'm here, but my friends aren't adopted and I'm adopted. So like I'm a little bit removed. Like there's something between me and them. And when I was younger, I took that to mean I was special. It made me feel different in a special way. But I think feeling different is feeling different, and special is its own kind of defense mechanism, or a way to avoid confusion. Um, and I was thinking what you just said about the belonging is so beautiful. And I think that I have grown up with an ache inside of me, like I'm a half magnet and I'm aching for that other half of a magnet. And what I've come to realize is that that's not a feeling that I have to try to kill with like food or things, that it's an ache I can learn to live with. That this is the state that for me, the state of being alive is to live with a state of longing and to not be afraid of that. It used to scare me, because it was like, well, I long for this thing, so I should go get it. Or I long for this thing, but what if I can't have it? But it's just a feeling. Do you know what I mean? And it's not a bad feeling. It's just my heart is open and a little bit aching. But that could also be called love. Um, Does that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I agree with you 100%. I think that it's just that at different stages of development, when you have an awareness that you have this longing and you have an awareness that you belong but don't belong, you go through some phases and they're different for everyone. There's no one way of being anything. One size never fits all. But I think that, you do have points in your life where this becomes something to focus on. That I think, and there are also situations where you recognize it. You'll be sitting somewhere with one or the other of your families, and you can see you're belonging or not belonging. It's interesting to me also with marriage, and sometimes I use that as an example of open adoption being like marriage. You get in-laws, you get people who aren't related to you, who you haven't known all your life, and they become your in-laws, and they're in your life. And some of them you don't like at all. You don't want anything to do with them, and some of them you like better than any of the other people in your life. And so it's an interesting family structure. And I think it resembles when you have an open adoption, I think to the adoptive parents, the birth parents feel like in-laws. They may like them or not like them. And to the birth family, first family, the adoptive family feel like in-laws. I mean, you're stuck together because of this person. A child in the case of adoption and a partner in the case of marriage. And I think that the interesting thing is the norms in the situation of marriage or adoption where you have in-laws is you're not expected to have known them forever, and you can belong or not belong. You can choose to belong or not belong, and it becomes something different. So I've always been interested in how that works and how you see yourself in all three of those families, and maybe more. You may have been in foster homes. You may have, I mean, there may be more families that you've been a part of in your life. But I think it's important to sort of look at them and understand what were the ingredients that led to your belonging or not belonging. And how did you cope with it? And how do you cope with it? Because it happens all the time in life. And something you said before too, I think is important. You know, the story about adoption in the 30s was that you were chosen, the chosen baby. You weren't chosen. You know, I used to think there was a room with millions of babies, and you could go around and say, "Oh, I like this one. I think I'm like puppies." You know, and even puppies you don't choose. You go to you go to get your rescue dog, and you can sort of choose. There are a few there, but you're not choosing from millions. So this chosen business is interesting because it's been told to be something great. But I used to always say, you know, chosen people were not always the luckiest. We described Jewish people as the chosen people, and it was a tough experience. We use the word chosen in weird ways, and if you're chosen, it puts a spotlight on you in ways that sometimes isn't so great.
Mhm.
So I don't know if chosen is fair, especially in adoption, because you weren't picked in that way. And to give a child that idea and then to find out it isn't true. There are so many lies that we tell for thinking it's a nicer way to tell a story, but it's not the truth.
Mhm. I'm wondering how you work with narrative therapy when you're saying what you're saying, because I was thinking about how working in the Martha Beck's Wayfinder life coach training is helping me realize that my thoughts are not who I am, because for the last 8 or 10 years since I've been writing so much about adoption, I really identified with my thoughts. And so if my thoughts said to me, you don't belong because you're adopted, I grabbed that thought and I ran with it. And so the more I wrote about not belonging, the more I saw proof out in the world that I didn't belong. And that, after a while, it felt good to be vindicated, and then it didn't feel good because I'd written myself into a cage of not belonging. And so I'm curious, what I'm working on these days is to both have my story of adoption and not feeling like I belong, but also having my body in the present moment, which it does belong here because it is here, and having both, because I don't want to live a life where I feel I don't belong. That won't feel good.
But that's the goal. The goal is to have both. The
Mhm,
goal is to balance both. You
mhm,
you can't just live in your body and not have your mind, and you can't just live in your mind and not have your body. You have to be able to integrate them.
mhm,
And in narrative therapy, I think what you do is you integrate them. The stories you're told impact you in various ways. And if you're not paying attention to the feelings that go with those stories, the reason I think I like narrative therapy, and I like all kind. I mean, I feel very eclectic because I'll use different pieces of things with different people. But narrative for adoption is good because it's often about the story, and the story you're told impacts the story you tell yourself.
mhm,
And in narrative therapy, you get to tell yourself the story, you get to reframe it. You're not telling a lie, you're not making up a different story. Your perspective of your story changes over time. And how you feel about that really is important. And you're absolutely right. The way you're embodied, the way your body takes in that information, and you're feeling something, even just the word belonging,
mhm,
when you were saying it, you could see that it's a very deep feeling word. And I think it's important to allow yourself to feel. Many people have, emotional cutoff because of the way their adoption took place. They were taken, placed, get over it, and adapt. And
mhm,
so, what about what you went through? What about the feelings? What about the process? And in the old days, before adoption became an industry, there were ways that you stayed with your birth parent for a while and you transitioned, and it was too upsetting to the adults involved. So it was stopped. But what about the baby? I used to say this at every conference that I went to for lawyers. I used to speak at the American Academy of Adoption Attorneys, and my big quote over and over would be, "What about the baby?" You know, you're there being the adult's person. You're representing the adults involved, but what about the baby? You say it's in the best interest of the baby, but according to the adult that you're representing,
Mm,
it's the birth family or the adoptive family. But what about the baby? And I
mm,
think that's, you pay a lot of attention to what about the baby,
mm,
about how you feel during processes that go into the changes that happen in one's life.
mm. I love what you just said. And I was focused on, I picked up on the idea of using narrative therapy to knit the stories together, both the story of the body and your own story, because particularly for adoptees, like all they have to do is say their name and the story's already started for many of them, or their birthday, right? There's this long story. And someone yesterday asked me about complexity and storytelling, and I was thinking about how first in my writing classes, so many adopted people, when they present their writing, the first thing they say is, well, it's all over the place. And it's 99% of the time it's not. It's just that they're doing what you're saying. They're doing the knitting, and they're so used to parsing it out that it feels like too much. Actually, can we, off camera, can we talk about doing a year-long group on narrative therapy? I think that would be really, I would love to do that with you. Okay, can we go off camera now? Because I want to talk about it now.
Yeah, but I want to say one thing that I
Yeah,
don't forget because I'll
yeah,
forget the
yes,
next.
say it.
I already forgot it. No.
Who are you?
I know, I know. No, I think that the name thing is really important, and you know, we would start with some of those kinds of things, but any group I've ever run with adoptees, I make a point of having people introduce themselves with all their names and what they mean. And I think it's important because you're claimed by your name. In ancient cultures, you were given these, you know, I always loved Native American names and names that were, you know, eagle feather, spring, you know, they had to do with something beautiful that was happening at the time of your birth, or you're being named for someone in different religions and different cultures. Um, so names are important. And don't let me forget, because I have a bunch of name stories that I think illustrate how belonging gets disrupted by changes of name, too.
Do you want to talk about that right now?
No, I think it's a big subject, and I think we're close to we're trying to have these be succinct. So I think,
Okay, okay, I wrote a note. Um, okay, wonderful. Now I'm all stirred up and I'm supposed to end this.
I
Okay, so
know,
I have to think of a way to end it.
well, we're going to talk.
Okay, we're gonna talk. Okay, so
Everyone will be waiting for our next.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So don't push any buttons because I'm gonna push the button.
Okay.
Okay, I'll
I got
see you. Oh, and if anybody has anything that we didn't cover that they want us to cover, please write it in the chat because it's so helpful to us.